You got to love the South African Jewish Board of Deputies, SAJBD. Founded in 1912, they claim they are the representative. They represent Jews in South Africa, or the South African Jewry, because they were founded around the time 1912, when there was a very upsurge of anti-Semitism in Europe, and there was a movement of a lot of Jewish people all over the world to what we now call the Jewish diaspora, which is South Africa and other countries all over the world, where they went after the pogrom started in Europe prior to the Holocaust in 1945, which was discovered in 1945, because you need to understand the context of Jewish migration has not always been about a pull, but has been about a push. Wherever they were in Europe, they were pushed out by laws that were being passed that were anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic, and as a consequence, some of them would have been affluent financially, and those laws were passed out of jealousy by those Europeans, those Caucasians, and other Anglo-Saxons, and so they moved from Europe and came to other countries. So in South Africa, they arrived in the 19th century, and 19th century, 20th century. And then in 1912, the South African Jewish Board of Deputies was founded to take care of the interests of those Jews that arrived in South Africa, some of them being involved in commerce, some of them in mining. You have to think back to the Oppenheimers of those years. So it was formed, and it was representing this fringe, minute group of Jewish people in South Africa who were, we'll say in the Jewish diaspora, but because in Europe as well, they were there, they didn't actually find it as home, but most of them had settled there. So they find themselves being here. And the good thing about Jews is when they arrive at a place, they are able to weave themselves into the fabric of that place, to become part of that community, to become charitable while actually maintaining their character. You know, when you go into what you call a Jewish neighborhood, even now in South Africa, or even in historic areas where you go to Morocco, you go to Iraq, you go to Yemen, you go to Iran, you go to all the areas that used to have a huge population of Jewish people, you'll find that their culture is so distinct. You can see from where they used to stay that, no, this used to be a Jewish area. And that's a very good thing about Jewish people, that they stick very much to their culture, even when they come and integrate with the people in that other community, become charitable, you know, cross-breed, gain from the experience of the people, and the people gain from their experience. They are quite charitable people. So in 1912, the Second Jewish Board of Deputies was created for that purpose, to say the Jews that came to South Africa at the time, you know, they were going to find an organization that will welcome them home. That really, like, they are, I don't want to use the word aliyah, because aliyah is something else now, but that was going to make them feel at home wherever they arrive. So that's why you find Jewish communities in the United States, in Britain, everywhere else where they go, they had a Jewish Board of Deputies that actually made sure that their culture, their synagogues, their Judaism is being maintained. And I think the SJBD, South African Jewish Board of Deputies, it did serve that purpose from 1912 until apartheid started in South Africa, when it was institutionalized in 1945, because you must understand, in 1913 the Land Act was passed, apartheid started before that, land dispossession started before that, and in 1948, when the Afrikaner came to power and apartheid was institutionalized, the Jews were now being marginalized, because they were being looked at as these other people who were chased from other continents, because the core of the Boers came from Europe. Your Hendrik Verwoerd were not born in South Africa, your Jimmy Kruger, they were not born in South Africa. These were Europeans, so they were here, they were now in power after fighting so long against the British, and now they looked at the Jews wherever they were, in whatever sector, or they thought the Jews were not integrating, because like I say, you'll always find Jewish communities that are vibrant within any other society, while at the same time they're not exclusive. Them as Jewish people, they don't exclude their culture from others. You can convert to Judaism and become a Jew tomorrow. So in 1948, the Boers, because these were actually Nazis, the Boers were an offshoot of the Nazis of Germany, the ones that had instituted a pogrom that resulted in another mass migration of Jewish people in the 1932, 33, 34, 35, 36. All around this time they came here. There's a large number of those that actually came to South Africa around that time. So the numbers were growing, and so when the Boers came into power, they started panicking about the about Boers, about Jews in South Africa, and they started enacting laws that excluded Jewish people because, like I say, the Boers were Europeans who came here and found the people they chased who were here, and the people they chased there, they came here, and so they continued the persecution of Jews in South Africa that they started by their brothers and cousins in Europe. So since 1948, Jews have never really had an opportunity to express themselves openly like Afrikaners, to a large extent like the English, like everyone else. But they were not treated like black people or Indians or colors. They were given a class of their own. So they were expected, like every person that's white, because most of those that came to South Africa were Ashkenazi, which means the European Jews. So they were expected to also do their 3 years mandatory military service in the South African Defense Force. So whenever they turned 19, they went into the army, they served in the army, and they were given a certain level of privilege while actually being marginalized in a lot of things. They were not marginalized in legislation because for the longest time they had political parties. Helen Suzman was a Jew who was in the parliament of the Afrikaners for the longest time. There were others that came after her. And so the Progressive Federal Party and later on the Democratic Party represented the aspirations of who we call liberals, but to a large extent the aspirations of Jews, and then later on a little bit of English-speaking people, because English didn't actually have a party after the 1948, after the disappearance of the South African Party. Now, the South African Jewish Board of Deputies, after that, when apartheid became institutionalized, it started really when conflict started happening between the white minority government and the black government. The Jews, because they had privileges, they needed to come out and actually choose a side to say, are we going to be this fringe group that is protected, that's been given privilege by this apartheid government, and enjoy that and act as if there is no oppression of others, or are we going to be people that are going to stand with those that are being oppressed? So in a way, in an intersectional way, instead of aligning with the Boers, rather align with those that are being oppressed. That is where you see a split within the South African Jewry. That's when you saw the emergence of your Helen Josephs, your Ruth First, your Slovos, your lots and lots of them. Later on, the Bergildas, Dennis Goldbergs, they emerged. They said, you know what, we cannot take these crumbs that were being given by the white government and actually believe that we are being given everything else. We believe in a country of equal rights, because they left Europe, their families left Europe because they didn't want to be segregated. They come here, they find segregation, they said we can't stand it. At that time, when most of the Jews or some of the Jews started aligning with those who were oppressed, the South African Jewish Board of Deputies now started aligning strongly with the apartheid government, because its role was to protect minority interests instead of protecting human rights. They started aligning with the apartheid government, and so that is when you started seeing the surging of relationships between Israel and South Africa and the apartheid government of South Africa, because the Jewish Board of Deputies stopped becoming a Jewish Board of Deputies. It became an organization that represented Zionists, those that looked at Israel as their spiritual home. So that's where the divergence started, whereby the Board of Deputies stopped representing Jews. It started representing Zionists. It started representing Israeli interests and stopped representing the interests of the Jews in South Africa. So in 1981, the Boers could easily go to Mozambique and bomb Ruth First. They could bomb Albisash. They could chase on Ronnie Casrils. They could chase on all the other Jews. They could even put some of them in jail. Some of them were in the treason trial with Nelson Mandela in the 60s. Lots and lots of Jews were part of that. They could chase a lot of them because most of them were communists, and not fearing that a country that claimed to be a homeland of the Jews is going to stand up to them, because these Jews in South Africa who stood with those that were oppressed, they were not Zionists, and then by South African Jewish Board of Deputy standards, they were not perceived to be Jews. These were being sullied as capos or traitors, those who believed that they were traitors to the Jewish cause, as if the Jewish cause was about preserving Israel as an apartheid state. So the apartheid government of South Africa worked with the apartheid government of Israel in pursuing nuclear weapons, and they managed to get that And the Jewish Board of Deputies continued to urge the Jewish community that supported them, the Synagoguean Jewish community, to support the South African government through allowing their sons to go into the military, funding them, giving them some kind of support. So the South African Jews who aligned to the SAJBD, they became intertwined with the apartheid project, with the racism project, and as time went on, they became part of the problem. Now, I'm giving this background for you to understand the position where the South African Jewish Board of Deputies finds itself now, whereby after the events of October 7, the prison break by Palestinians in Gaza of October 7, they have now become very strong in support of Israel genocide, Israel pogroms in the West Bank, Israel actions wherever they are. They've become protectors of Israel, and in doing that, they've dropped the ball when it comes to Jews in South Africa, because a majority of Jews all over the world, they've shifted focus from seeing Israel as a spiritual home for the Jews, but seeing it as an ethno-nationalist state that is oppressing the native people of Palestine, that doesn't want to share the land that they won in 1948, that doesn't want any solution apart from ethnic cleansing and the forceful removal of Palestinians, ethnic cleansing from Gaza into wherever they want to put them. And now, the global narrative when it comes to Zionism is that there is a surge of anti-Semitism, that you go to universities, Jews are being feel threatened, are being marginalized, are being, lots of things are happening. And now, because they've managed to sell that narrative, the South African Jewish Board of Deputies in South Africa is trying to sell that well as well, to say Jews in South Africa, they feel marginalized. Jews in South Africa, in universities, they feel threatened. And now they've taken the case up to, there's a case that involved the University of Cape Town, because they're forcing it to adopt a pro-Zionist definition of anti-Semitism. That if you are critical of the Jewish state or of the state of Israel, you, by extension, inadvertently, you are against the Jewish people. So they've taken the case to say the universities in South Africa must adopt International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism, which actually is a defense against Israel, which says if you criticize the policy of Israel, if you criticize ethnic cleansing, you criticize occupation, you criticize settlement expansion, you are an anti-Semite. You are against Jewish people. Don't want to see Jewish people prosper anywhere in the world. That forcing UCT, and then as a result, UCT is defending itself, taking the case. It's now in the High Court in Cape Town, in the Western Cape High Court. And now the Jewish Report, a publication or a media outlet that is a mouthpiece of the SAJBD, Jewish Board of Deputies, is running a story projecting the image that the Board of Deputies is the sole and exclusive representative of Jewish people in South Africa. Now you've got South African Jews for Palestine, you've got other organizations that are for Jewish people in South Africa that are not Jewish Board of Deputies, and they're disputing the allegation or the imposition, how South African Jewish Board of Deputies is imposing itself on Jews to say, we are the representative of the Jews, and our position is that Jews in South Africa, Jews in South Africa are here for Israel. They support Israel's actions. They want to see Israel flourish at the expense of the Palestinian people. They support the fact that there must not be a Palestinian state. Now, there's a case before court, and now the Jewish Report is putting an article, trying to sully everyone else. And you can see the racism coming out because Zionists are racist. Senior Counsel Geoff Butlander, who's a Jew, representing the university, came out, spoke at in court and said, look, the SAJBD Board of Deputies does not represent Jews in South Africa because it does not represent me. It's an unelected structure. That's my addition. It's an unelected structure. It doesn't want to account to anyone, but it claims to be representing Jews. And so when it takes proper pro-Israel positions, it portrays an image as if Jews in South Africa are pro-Israel, which is not. And which I think it's anti-Semitism when you try to conflate Judaism with Zionism. So they are doing that, and right now they are forcing themselves. They are saying, no, she came out, the director, Khan, no, we are the representing Jews in South Africa, because the argument by UCT is that, look, you cannot say a university must adopt the definition of anti-Semitism without consulting the other student population, because there are lots of students in UCT. You cannot just impose and say suddenly if you look at the Jew Fani, it means it's anti-Semitism, which is what Jewish Board of Deputies and the Zionist organization wants UCT to do, and UCT is saying we need to consult people, because Board of Deputies knows that the moment they go to consultation, they're not going to win it. When you go to consultation, you're going to get Jewish organizations that are not Zionists coming out and saying, no, but we cannot adopt that definition, which has been forced down the throats of many institutions all over the world. And right now, the definition, when you go to Georgetown, you go to Harvard, you go to other universities, Yale, in Western countries, they define anti-Semitism by the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, which is saying if you oppose Israel's overreach, if you oppose the genocide, you are anti-Semitic, and any measure or any criminal measure that is taken against such people is going to be taken against you. Which I think Second Jewish Board of Deputies, by really trying to do that, they are reducing anti-Semitism to a bumper sticker on a car, whereby everyone walking around is going to be an anti-Semite. So it's a court case that you should look at in interest, because it's in the interest of South Africa. Whatever the outcome there is going to be quite important. But if the judgment comes out and says, whenever you have to impose this, you need to consult with stakeholders, it's going to set good precedent, because it will mean that definition is not going to be adopted anywhere in South Africa. So, like and subscribe to ASAP, a second perspective. Let's make the second bigger, and let us stop this attempt to change the narrative. If apartheid was defined through consensus and was adopted as a convention by the United Nations in 1973, the Convention on the Suppression of the Crime of Apartheid, why can't suppression on the crime of a convention on the crime of anti-Semitism be a consensus-based thing? Why should it be one person deciding that anti-Semitism is going to be what that says anti-Semitism, while apartheid has got the universal definition? Like and subscribe, yes, ASAP, a second perspective. Let's make the circle bigger.